And thank you very much, Nexus Soviets or Nexusites, for being here in such large numbers. This is my first visit to Australia, and it's been an absolutely awesome trip and an awesome experience. And also a great big thank you for Duncan for helping to organize a few other events around Australia that has led up to this, our final event. And they've been completely mind-blowing experiences, each and every one of them. So, right. These are just some of the books that Duncan mentioned, and we're going to take a little trip of discovery. I'm going to go through this at pace, because this is normally a 3-hour presentation that I'm squeezing into half the time. So bear with me. If I don't spend a lot of time on something, doesn't mean there isn't a lot of interesting material to discuss. There's loads on every slide. We can probably spend at least half an hour or more, but we're going to go through this and just touch upon some subjects, and I'm sure that all of you are bright enough to go away and do your own research on things that we don't delve deeply enough today. Sorry. So we're going to try and connect the dots and see if we can learn from ancient civilizations and what we find in the past that will benefit us today. Because I truly believe that the days of just looking at marveling at history and wondering what was going on in ancient times are over. We've got to start putting to good use the knowledge and information we use. And the time is here. And what I've discovered, the more I delve into this, the more time I spend on this, I do believe that we are the people we've been waiting for. Each and every one of you is here to play a very important role in spreading this information and taking this away from here. It's what you do after this conference that really matters. Until this moment, it was all part of history. Until what happens after this is on your shoulders, what you do with this knowledge and information. That's how quickly we can spread and impact on the rise of consciousness around this planet. The fact that we don't have immediate answers for these 3 simple questions that most of us have asked ourselves at some stage. Many of us have asked this many times. Who are we? Where do we come from? Why are we here? The fact that we don't have immediate answers for these 3 simple questions clearly points to the fact that we are a species with amnesia. And somewhere along the line, we've lost this knowledge, because when we look at the ancient cultures, they seem to have a lot more information, a lot more knowledge about these 3 questions. They tell us exactly who we are, where we come from, and why we're here. But we choose to ignore that information. Well, maybe not this crowd here, but certainly, as James Gilliland calls it, the powers that were are choosing to ignore that information and feed us with all kinds of BS that keeps us dumbed down. So how do you create a species with amnesia? About 500 years ago, you put men on ships supported by the Vatican. You make them invade the rest of the world. You make them invade native populations around the world. You destroy their written documentation. You destroy their oral memories, and you destroy everything that they've held dear for thousands of years, and replace all that with Bibles and other written Eurocentric documents. And you enforce that at the cost of death and other penalties, so that the people start to take their knowledge and information underground and start handing it down civilization after civilization, or generation and after generation. Yes, thank you. And realize that we're missing a huge amount of information here that is being kept by knowledge keepers, that are being keeping this very sacred and very safely guarded from people like us. But that's changing too, isn't it? Because we're now being given this information on a platter, because this is the time that we have to take it forward and start sharing it with the rest of the world. What I find when I start looking at the origins of humankind and ancient human history is that our history is much older, much stranger, and far more funky and exciting than most of us could ever imagine. It really is not just a history of thousands of years, but not hundreds of thousands of years, but actually millions of years of activity on this planet, of really weird and wild stuff that boggles the mind. One such example of how strange it is the study of giants in human history. And I normally spend a lot more time on this, but for this, just this little example showing us some really exciting discoveries. This is not just somebody's doodling. These are real discoveries. There we are on the extreme left, 6 feet tall. And then on the extreme right here, this is the guy that I'm mostly interested in, this fella here. The reason I'm interested in him is because that's exactly the size of the footprint that I found close to me in South Africa. It's about a 2-hour drive from where I live. The problem with this footprint is that it's left in rough granite. Now, all geologists and scholars will tell you, you can't leave a footprint in granite. It's impossible. It must be a fake. Well, it's not a fake. It's a real footprint. And it was found in 1931 in the middle of the bush when a guy was hunting. And it's clearly a really huge problem, because if you can't leave a footprint in granite, how the hell does it get there? When I first posted this on YouTube, I had hundreds of home-taught geologists and university-taught geologists send me emails calling me a bloody idiot. You know, this is a fake, and you know that you can't leave a footprint in granite. You're an idiot, and all this kind of stuff. And my answer to them was, I know that. This is why I posted it, because it's a real problem that we have to deal with. Here it is. How did it get there? And then I got an email from a third-generation geologist and a gold explorer in Canada who said that this is nothing strange. They find this all the time. They extract gold out of granite. And after extracting the gold from the granite, they leave behind what he describes as a wet sort of concrete sludge. When they go away for winter and they come back, they often find bird footprints and other animal footprints in what used to be this wet granite pile of concrete, wet concrete, and now it's gone hard. And unless you knew this, you'd go, how the hell is it possible to get footprints of birds and other animals in this granite? The same way we wonder about this. How the hell did this giant leave a footprint in granite? What's the common denominator here? Gold, yeah. And this becomes really interesting and exciting, because that seems to be the common denominator we can't get away from. The other reason I'm excited about this footprint, because my good friend Klaus Donner from Vienna found the remains of a giant in Ecuador that were tested in Vienna, and it was proven to be a giant that would have been about 7.5 meters tall, that would have left a footprint about that size. Now we're getting giants across the Atlantic, from Ecuador and Southern America to South Africa and beyond. I was just shown a giant footprint outside here, found north of here in Queensland, a giant footprint about this size in rock. It just blew my mind, literally 10 minutes ago. It's never been seen before. So I guess we'll be posting that very soon. And this is how this information comes out. We're getting bolder and braver to share this stuff, no longer confined to the vaults and the basements of museums, because people now share this information. The other thing about these ancient sites is that they're a lot older than we can imagine. This is a great example. Stonehenge, we all know Stonehenge. We look at it and we know the official dating. It's a few thousand years, 5000 BC. I don't even know what the latest official dating on Stonehenge is, but it's all BS. It's all, I don't know where they get this stuff from. They make it up as they go along because they don't have anything else to tell us. So here's a huge problem with all that dating technique that you've heard until now. This is this stone lying here used to stand upright next to this one here, and they were connected at the top. At some stage, this one fell over and broke. It broke over there, as you can see. The problem with this, and I just had Robert Schoch in South Africa, in Cape Town and Johannesburg with me, and I asked him, Robert, what do you make of this? This is a big problem from a geological perspective, and he just smiled at me and shook his head. He says, yeah, it's a big problem, because the erosion, as you can see, there's the break. That's supposed to be a few thousand years old. I'm afraid that geologically, that just simply isn't going to wash. And if there are any geologists here, you'll know what I'm talking about. Erosion on sarsen stone that's a few thousand years old. We're dealing with probably 1 million years or more of erosion here. Why Stonehenge is still there in this form, I don't know. What I'm telling you is it's impossible for it to have eroded to this state and be a few thousand years old. We're dealing with an extremely old site of extreme importance on this planet that we've got no bloody idea about, but we can start imagining, because Miho Ledwith, who's become a good friend of mine, I'll be seeing him again soon in Yelm, Washington. As you can see, used to keep some very interesting company many years ago. These two gentlemen, he was the advisor to these two guys at the Vatican for about 17 years. And at one stage, he made a very important discovery. He found out that the opening phrase of the Hebrew Bible is completely incorrect. It's missing the obligatory first letter of the Hebrew alphabet, which it has to have, the letter Aleph. When he inserted Aleph into the opening phrase of the Hebrew Bible, it changed everything. It no longer says, in the beginning God created the heavens and the earth. It now says, in Hebrew. I'm going to say it in English, otherwise you wouldn't understand a bloody word. I've tried to memorize it, but I haven't succeeded yet. It now says, the Father of the beginnings created the Elohim, the heavens and the earth. And that changes everything. Not only does it change everything, it brings the creation story and the Bible in alignment with all other ancient cultures, and becomes very exciting for us to start analyzing what this truly means. And we start getting a deeper insight into the so-called Father, Son, and the Holy Spirit, and what that may actually mean in true form. What you find is when you start looking at creation stories and origins of humankind, no matter where you go, where you scratch, how far you go, sooner or later, you'll come across those two words, sound and resonance. They are truly the common links of religion and creation stories all over the world. In Christianity, we have the Word. God said, let there be light, and it's important. So it's the sound of God, and then comes the light. And keep that sequence in a very important order there. And Hinduism, we have Om, the primordial creative sound that created everything. The Egyptians believed the universe was sung into creation. And the Hindu creation story is fantastic. It tells us that everything was so peaceful and silent that Vishnu slept undisturbed by dreams or motion. From the depths, a humming sound began to tremble. Om. It grew and spread, filling the emptiness and throbbing with energy. The night had ended. Vishnu awoke. That's just a slightly more colorful version of God said, let there be light. I hope you like my dramatization of that. Yeah. And then we start stumbling across the very importance of sacred numbers and sacred geometry in these creation stories, and making this very important connection to realize that all of this stuff is connected. You cannot separate anything from anything else. 6 days of creation. This number 6 becomes very key. For those who study this will know what I mean. 6 aspects of Om. And you start seeing in the Maya creation story, read about the heart of sky and 6 other deities, including the feathered serpent, who wanted to create human beings with hearts and minds who could keep the days as good slaves. And then we find the 6 aspects of all-seeing eye of Horus. In this particular example, it becomes very obvious that we're dealing with sound and resonant harmonic ratios. It's showing us in the image. Resonant harmonic ratios. What does this all have to do with ancient civilizations? Everything. They understood sound and they understood frequency, and they used it as a source of energy for everything they did. But sound and frequency was also used to control and manipulate humanity. Remember that the ancient cultures didn't carve things into rock and make little images for nothing. Everything that they left behind for us has very specific reason. Everything that they drew and carved was done meticulously. And every little bit of information on every carving is there for a specific reason, not because they had nothing better to do. So when we look at these carvings, we got to study them down to the finest detail to try and understand what it is they're trying to tell us. And some of these are beautiful examples. For example, the all-seeing eye of Horus. You all know by now, this is common knowledge, that it's just a representation of the pineal gland. The organ in our body that should connect us to everyone else, to everything else in creation, that should allow us to communicate telepathically. What do you do when you sever our ability from using the pineal gland to communicate telepathically? You give whoever has done that the capacity to control us and lie to us. Because if I can no longer read your mind, if I can't read your thoughts, you can lie to me. If I can read your mind, there can be no deception. And that's a great plan to create a species with amnesia. Make sure they cannot communicate telepathically. And this is why this all-seeing eye of Horus plays such an important role in all of human history. And all this symbolism that is so shoved so obviously into our faces. It gets even more interesting. Taking control of humanity through cone-shaped tools. When you look at these images, you clearly see these beings and these winged beings and winged bird-like beings utilizing cone-shaped tools of some sort, and having this weird wristwatch that's got like a 12 cones pointing into the middle. 12 cones pointing into the middle, and they're holding a cone-shaped something in their hand, manipulating humanity with cone-shaped tools, controlling the pineal gland and the tree of life, if you want to call it that, the DNA, with cone-shaped tools. And this becomes very important, using sound and frequency to do this, because sound and frequency are the true tools to manipulate everything in creation, because it's the source of everything, right? And this hasn't stopped. In ancient times, they controlled us with sound, through sound and frequency and cone-shaped tools and the all-seeing eye of Horus, and this has carried on through thousands of years. They show us in the logos through the corporations that control us with sound and frequency that this continuation of manipulation is still there. The all-seeing eye of Horus, and there you go. And here you got 6 of those cones pointing to the middle that the guy had on his wristwatch in ancient times, and they're telling us that they're controlling us through sound and frequency. And then you got to ask, well, what is sound? Sound is source of creation. We create infinite number of shapes, infinite number of physical manifestations every time we speak, but we've somehow lost the ability to actually complete this manifestation process. And this is a really shortened version of this presentation, so I'm not going to go into this, but this is deeply, deeply connected to the number of chromosomes we have, the number of letters of the alphabet, the number of cards in the major arcana cards, the number 22. And this number 22 is a critical number to look into once you start looking at what happened at the Tower of Babel event, and how they said, let us go down and destroy their language, for if they can do this, they can become like us. This has nothing to do with making people speak different languages because they were really, really bad, and they were misbehaving and sodomizing and having sex and whatever the bad things these people were doing, right? It's got nothing to do with that. It's got everything to do with realizing that the people were reaching levels of consciousness and realizing that they could manifest themselves with sound. And this needed to be controlled. When you look at most likely what many people have shown, the Tower of Babel was really a spiraling structure. It could be a metaphor for creating vortices and so forth, and understanding how to manifest with sound. Sound is a source of creation. We know from sand on a metal plate, this word called cymatics. Every frequency creates a very specific shape, very unique shape to that specific sound and frequency, and it does not change. This is just spectacular work done by Robert Boerman in Holland. Sound captured as light in water shows you, remember, you're looking at a two-dimensional event, two-dimensional effect of a three-dimensional event. So imagine this in 3D. It's truly spectacular. And then these are the Mayan numbers, 20 hertz and 13 hertz in 2D. Light, sound captured as light in water. Spectacular work. And this takes us to what else we can ascribe to sound. Well, sound levitates. It boils water. It creates light. It creates DNA. It heals. Destroys pathogen. Sound travels beyond the speed of light. Now, this is one of the best kept secrets of science and physics. Sound travels beyond the speed of light. My goodness, we can't put this on the 8 o'clock news. It'll give people too many ideas. So, you got to go search for this kind of stuff. And very importantly is that sound is a precursor to electromagnetism, not the other way around. Remember, God said, let there be light. And it seems to me that it's this combination of sound and light that activates this infinite quantum soup of possibility and starts to manifest all this amazing stuff around us. And in there somewhere lies the encoded secret of the Father, the Son, and the Holy Spirit in ways that we are starting to think about slightly differently. Sound is the breath of the Creator. It's the prime resonance frequency. Imagine everything in creation being at the prime resonance frequency of the Creator. Everything has to exist in harmonic resonance, in coherent harmonic resonance. Anything that is outside of that cannot exist within this prime resonance frequency. It has to resonate with the original source. So, if you're out of sync, if you're in dis-ease, or if you're incoherent or dissonant with the prime resonant frequency, you become diseased. And I believe that this is exactly what Star Trek has been trying to tell us for many, many decades. They've been calling it the Prime Directive. What they do when they talk about you cannot breach the Prime Directive is just telling us that you can't go against the prime resonant frequency of everything in creation. You become the cancer cell that vibrates against everything in creation. And what happens to a cancer cell in a healthy organism? It gets expelled. And that's what happens. Anyone or anything that goes against the prime resonant frequency eventually gets expelled. Sometimes it might take thousands of years, millions of years. Sometimes it might take a few milliseconds. It all depends on the size and shape and set of circumstances. This is a beautiful thing, and we need to start embracing when we start to consider our current position in the place we take and the roles we play on this planet right now. Sound is also the inspiration for religious symbols. These are some of the beautiful photographs of cymatic patterns and cymatic spheres done by John Stuart Reid and Dean Baker with a cymoscope. And again, you can see much more detail on the internet. You can clearly see in the cross-section of one of these bubbles the cross in a circle. And when you drill deeper into this, you'll find that very obviously this cross in a circle becomes very evident. And you see the beautiful sacred geometric curves that appear in there, and you realize that those that started to draw their crosses in ancient times and that came up with their logos for their religions knew exactly what they were doing. They knew what the source was that they were putting down on paper and carving in stone. They did not have their logos designed by ad agencies. And it just permeates right through human history. You see this knowledge and information encoded everywhere. Even the medicine wheel in Native American culture is just a cross in a circle, telling us that the Native American medicine men knew that sound heals and sound cures. It's the primordial source of things, for God's sake. It has to be able to do everything. Even the Sumerian seals, like this one, shows us that the swastika has its origins in sound, and you start seeing how interesting a character Hitler was. The original people of Australia creation story is one of my favorites because it shows us, it clearly tells us how the earth and the mountains and the formations of the surface of planet Earth actually took place. And it's great that I can share this here with you. It says, time began when the supernatural beings awoke and broke through the surface of the earth. They moved about the earth, bringing into being the physical features of the landscapes. And they did this all with 3 sacred songs. And you see how that all connects into all other ancient cultures and the story of sound and resonance and this thing called Holy Trinity, sound, light, and the infinite quantum soup. So here, just to show you Hans Jenny's brilliant work, just imagine this on a large scale on the surface of planet Earth, how mountains and valleys and everything gets formed through sound, resonating through the surface of planet Earth.
Circular shapes appear, but these are in a state of continuous upheaval. The particles are pushed outwards from the center and inwards again from the outside, and at the same time they pulsate.
This is just powder, very fine powder on a metal plate.
We can recognize the various patterns of the vibratory fields. They move to and fro, unite, and separate again according to the vibratory state of the surface formed by the membrane. And we can, as it were, move over a landscape which is in a state of vibration. If we intensify the note, if we produce a crescendo for the ear, the masses are hurled outwards. We see fountains, eruptions, explosions almost. But invariably, the particles return to the center, so that here again, even under these violently dynamic conditions, we find there is circulation.
I think you get the drift. Peter Davey has been boiling water with sound since 1940. Unfortunately, he took the secret to his grave. But I must tell you that an Australian showed me that he reinvented this just in Sydney recently. When I finished my presentation in Sydney, a guy came up to me and said, I reconstructed what Peter Davey did, and I got very, very excited. So we hope to share that with everybody on YouTube and on the internet as soon as we finish this tour, and we can put it out there. But he just boiled water with sound and inadvertently gave us free energy, because if you can boil water with that little sound, how much water do you want to boil? Today we burn the coal, so we boil the water to create the steam to drive the hydro turbine so we can get electricity. So if you just need to boil the water, you can eliminate the mining of the coal and save our beautiful planet, burning of the coal and polluting the skies, and you can just boil the water with Peter Davey's device, because how much water do you want to boil, right? And this is clearly a huge problem that we have, because, once again, money got in the way. Peter Davey's been waiting his whole life for production lines. He didn't realize that he gave the world an alternative source of free energy. He was more interested in making cups of tea with his bloody device. And that's how narrow-minded some of us can be. And people like Peter and often inventors and people that make these discoveries are so naive and so beautifully ignorant of what's really going on in the world that they become the worst enemies of the things that they've discovered. So keep that in mind. If you know anyone that's discovered anything in the line of free energy or alternative electricity, tell them to put it on the internet. Do not hold on to that. Do not try and create production lines. The worst thing you can do is try and patent it or create production lines. It's like walking into the office of the enemy. So in 2011, Luc Montagnier spontaneously created DNA in a test tube with sound. Now, this is just remember what this means. It tells us that we are just the physical manifestation of the divine source code of the divine resonant frequency, the prime resonance frequency manifested in this concentrated little body of mine, with every nucleus of every cell in my body, especially the skin, which is on the outside, turning you into a walking receiver and transmitter of this resonance. So we should be connected to the morphogenetic field and to the prime resonance frequency of everything in creation. But somehow most of us can't quite make that connection, and we can't quite understand. And when we get this information downloaded, we don't really understand how to digest it, and we just discard it. But we're waking up. We're getting better at this, and we're learning from those that have mastered some of this. Sound is the ultimate source of free energy, and I believe that this is really it. Mother Earth, Gaia, gives us sound all the time. And I do believe that this is what Nikola Tesla found out when he gave the world free electricity and free energy, his source of radiant energy that moved through everything instantly. I believe that this is one of his most ignored statements, that the earth rings like a bell, is a very important clue. And remember, this free source of energy, now we know that sound is a primordial source of energy. Mother Earth is giving us this free energy all the time, never stops. We don't have to burn oxygen or burn water or break water down into hydrogen and oxygen and split the atom and do anything. All we need to do is use the bloody sound of Gaia. And that's it. It is the most noble and beautiful source of free energy that we have, given to us on a platter. And I do believe that this is what Tesla found when he built his tower on Long Island. What's interesting about this is that even this tower looks like it's a conical shape, isn't it, with a bubble on top. So even Tesla's tower starts to point towards conical forms. And this takes me back to taking control of humanity with cone-shaped tools. Why did I get so excited about this? It's because I started finding cone-shaped tools everywhere. And this is why I called it the ice cream cone phenomenon. And I believe that you've just been exposed to Ed Leeds-Cullen and Coral Castle. Well, the story goes that apparently he built Coral Castle using ice cream cones in his hands. Two schoolboys saw him maneuvering these 5-ton and 10-ton blocks of coral and very effortlessly through the air. And they told their parents, we saw the man moving the stuff with ice cream cones in his hands. And you can imagine what the parents said. Oh, naughty boys, go to bed. No ice cream for you. And I got excited when I heard this because I could understand what they were talking about. And this is, I mean, the Coral Castle is spectacular. You can't do this on your own unless you get some seriously advanced technology, right? So it's just not going to happen. And if any one of you know what I'm talking about, if you try to move stones around in the field, you realize how difficult it is. Anything over 50 kilograms becomes a huge, huge problem. Not even, 200 kilograms, forget about it. You're just not going to move it. You're not going to lift it anywhere. It's not going to happen. So you got to have some advanced tools and technology to do all this stuff, and that's exactly what he had. He had ice cream cones, for God's sake, And I've been finding these ice cream cones, one of the first things I started finding among the ruins in South Africa, and I started collecting them, knowing that somehow, just instinctively knowing that they were very important pieces of this puzzle, and they just seemed to be always associated with the stone circles. Then I started finding ice cream cones in ancient mines in England and cone-shaped tools in Egypt. In fact, some of these images here are very, very similar to the tool that I found, one of the tools that I found near the stone circles. And according to the Egyptologists, these are just ornamental. They have no idea what they're for. And then you start finding that even in the Great Zimbabwe ruins, the main feature inside is a conical tower facing the sky. And there are many more conical towers inside the ruins of Great Zimbabwe. Here's another perspective from inside of the main enclosure. It remains one of the great ruins on this planet. And Masvingo, Great Zimbabwe, and even in Australia here, in Sydney, I was shown and given a sample of this conical tool, this cone-shaped tool in Australia, and it's spectacular. You find it everywhere. The Native American priests use cone-shaped tools in the kivas when they do ceremony, and they bang the cone-shaped tools together to make a sound as part of their ceremony. And you start seeing the clues emanate from this. And then I found these. This is like finding the Holy Grail. These cone-shaped tools in the San Jose Rosicrucian Museum in California. And they are inscribed with Sumerian texts that commemorate the building of the temples in Sumer. Commemorating the building of the temples in Sumer, specifically the temple of Inanna. Now you got cone-shaped tools connected to ancient sites and building ancient sites from Edlitz-Kalnin to the temple of Inanna. And you got to start telling yourself what these cone-shaped tools do. If Edlitz-Kalnin was levitating these giant stones with ice cream cones, then clearly we got something to do with sound and Caesar technology, which we've only been introduced to in 2009, by the way, Caesar technology. This brings me to the rods and cones in our eyes, so that when you start looking at what Superman can do, you start thinking about it slightly differently. Maybe it's the cones in your retina that play a very important role in things that we should be able to do, but we don't. Why? Because, once again, the optic nerve has been severed from your pineal gland. And it no longer functions the way it should. And this brings me to Southern Africa. And history books tell us that Southern Africa was a sparsely populated part of the world. Apparently, nobody lived there, and they show you maps like this. And about 2,000 years ago, people started coming down either from West Africa or East Africa, and some had cows, some didn't have cows, and they came down and they crossed the Zambezi, and some left their cows behind, and they had to hand it in. I don't know what, but it's all to do with cows. Always to do with cows. And the reason why I say this is because the stone circles and the ruins of Southern Africa are often, if not most of the time, referred to as cattle kraal or cattle enclosures of little historic value, built by migrating tribes as they were moving through. It's just so much BS that it's just ridiculous. So what I can tell you that the fact that we have this vanished civilization at the southern tip of Africa completely and utterly blows the sparsely populated part of the world out of the water very, very quickly. And these stone circles show you just a few examples. First of all, you'll notice that everyone is circular, and yet everyone is completely unique. Some have very simple internal structures, some have complex internal structures. What's important to note is the stuff around the circles. It's like a spider's web that you find going around it. And often the stone walls are not very high. They're probably waist high most of the time. Sometimes when you can see they've been rebuilt and reconstructed, they go to maybe 2.5 meters high, and that's as high as it gets. Sometimes they're flat with the ground. You don't even know it's there until you actually look at it from the air, and you see aerial photographs and Google photography, and notice all the stuff covered by soil and sand. And it is, I don't go into this in this presentation, but there's overwhelming evidence that we're dealing with the Great Flood that actually destroyed this vast civilization. We find seashells and fossilized fish in stone circles on tops of mountains, and sea sand sediment of up to 15 meters deep. It's quite spectacular evidence of a giant flood that must have swept across there a long time ago. And then they built beautiful flower-shaped stone circles and flower-shaped patterns because they're pretty to look at. But you've got to be up in the air to really appreciate that. And not only are these stone circles aligned with the movement of the sun, solstices and equinoxes, but they're also deeply encoded with sacred geometry. And you start finding a fire factor in there, and hexagons emerge, and equilateral triangles that create some very interesting shapes, and star tetrahedrons, and you realize, my goodness, this must have been built for some holy cows, because otherwise it makes no sense. And you realize how much this information has passed through our history books. Channels that connect them all, that run for hundreds of miles. Can you see that spider's web effect around the circle that goes on, covers the entire mountain and connects everything together? These channels connect all the circles. These circles do not stand alone. You will never find a stone circle on its own. It's always connected into a larger grid through these channels and through the spider's web effect that it's actually nestled into. And so it goes. Many of these pictures were taken originally by Jan Heine over a 15-year period before I met him in 2007. And since then, everything changed. Imagine most of, or large parts of Southern Africa looking like this, being largely ignored, ascribing this to cattle kraal of little importance. It's a spectacular ignorance on the highest level of unconscious behavior. It's just ridiculous. And then, the 450,000 square kilometers of agricultural terraces clearly tell us that the sparsely populated part of the world, those hunter-gatherers were busy. Don't know why they needed terraces, but they built a lot of bloody terraces. And when you drive around, you start seeing it. When your eyes desensitize, you see terraces everywhere. And Google Earth shows you that there are terraces everywhere. And this is just up the road from my house. Here you see terraces, channels, and circles all connected, and some other interesting features that we don't have really time to go into. This is when you get to the top of the mountain, it looks like this. And from this vantage point, you're looking at a minimum of 60-kilometer radius that it would have looked like this a long time ago. And you got to also recognize the fact that there are no doors and entrances. The original structures have no doors and entrances. So clearly, when you discover that they have no doors and entrances, you've got to exclude the possibility that these are dwellings, whether they were for people or for holy cows. But that's not what our history books claim. They'll show you the archaeological drawings that clearly talk about no doors and entrances, and they're all connected by these weird channels that apparently were built for the people to drive their cattle on. And they're just obsessed with cows, our poor historians. They can't get away from it. And sometimes these stone circles are concentric, all connected by these channels. And this is not new, people. This is from 1939, and this is just being completely ignored. I don't know, the people got bored. They're bored of building cattle kraals, so they built them without doors and entrances and made the cows climb over the walls. I don't know what they were thinking. So when you ask yourself, how many of these ruins are there? That's when everything that you believed about human history flies out the window. Because in 1891, Theodore Bent estimated there were about 4,000 of these from horseback. 4,000 of these. I could deal with that, but by 1974, Roger Summers did a beautiful calculation and he found about 20,000 of these stone structures. Now, I got involved in about 2007. When I discovered this information, I thought, I live in the land of Indiana Jones, man. This is it. This is like the land of ancient civilizations. I'm going to go out there and conquer this. And by the time I walked through about 1,000 of these stone circles, within the first 6 months of starting to do this work in 2007, I realized that if I can walk through 1,000 of these, there must be at least 100,000 of these. So I started counting. And I counted one by one. No, I didn't. I did extrapolations. I got square kilometers. I looked at Google. I looked at aerial photographs, and I got averages. And And basically, by the time I finished counting, I think I got an average of about 3.26 stone circles per hectare. I mean, this is south of Johannesburg. There are thousands of circles covering the mountains, and it's just there. No one's doing anything about it. And by the time I finished counting, I found that there were more than 10 million of these. Not just a few thousand, but more than 10 million of these stone structures. Now, when that number hit me, I went back and back, did the calculation many times because I thought I was making a mistake. No, I was not. I now believe that there are actually more than 10 million of these. You just heard from Duncan about the ancient population of South America being in the hundreds of millions. Well, this is the same scenario. We're dealing with a densely populated part of the world with huge amounts of number of people, with huge activities that we know nothing about. We are facing a vanished civilization that we know absolutely nothing about. All we have are these weird structures with no doors and entrances. So what is the question we need to ask ourselves? What is all this ancient activity all about? It's always about the gold. You cannot separate human history from our obsession with gold. It's virtually impossible. And in the 11th century, Ahmed al-Biruni, Arabic scholar, writes about the prosperous gold exports from the port of Sofala. This is a port of Sofala on the right here, close to where the town of Beira in Mozambique is today. And they describe the gold exports being a month's journey inland from the port of Sofala. That's where they got the real gold dealers. And what happens when you go a month inland from the port of Sofala? You get to Great Zimbabwe at Masvingo, and you stumble upon the headquarters of this vast, vanished African gold mining civilization. And you realize that there's a lot more to the story that meets the eye. These are just these are the walls of Great Zimbabwe, 10 meters tall and 6 meters wide in places. And I must tell you that these walls resonate, they ring like a bell when you tap them like this, because I'll probably forget to tell you later. When you tap them with a little stone, that whole wall vibrates like it was perfectly constructed to do exactly that. And in more recent times, it's all about the gold. Some of you may not be aware, but the Anglo-Boer War from 1899 to 1902 was all about the gold. And this man, Cecil John Rhodes, was probably the architect of it. One of my favorite people to dislike, although we should love everybody. This is the man that truly destroyed Southern Africa and took possession of it for the crown and the queen. And this was all about the gold. His instructions were simple: secure this part of the world for the crown and make sure it remains secure. And that's, boy, did they do a good job. Did he do a good job of that? It was all about the gold. The interesting question is, the man that stood in his way is this guy here, Paul Kruger, one of the presidents of the Transvaal of the Boer republics. Remember, it was the British Empire. It remains the most expensive war the British Empire has ever fought, the South African War. In 1899, British Empire sent 470,000 troops. Put that into context today. 470,000 troops with ships, horses, hospitals, food, kitchens to South Africa to secure that for the crown. It's an insane operation, even in today's terms. Put this on ships and the logistics it took. The crown threw everything at this. Why? Because of the gold. Now you've got to ask yourself, what did they know that we don't know today? And this is the first time I think I'm going to actually talk about this in any presentation. Where did Paul Kruger get all the gold from? On the 4th of June, 1900, a train filled with gold left Pretoria for the port of Maputo, Mozambique. It is estimated, different reports tell you, it is from 300 tons to 3,000 tons to 20,000 tons of gold. Whatever it is, there were several wagons filled with gold. Now, the question we need to ask is, where did Paul Kruger get all the gold from? And that's a question no one's been asking. That is what the Queen and the Empire came to protect. Not the gold that Paul Kruger had on his train, but the source of that gold. Because there was not enough gold in the whole bloody world to fill a few trains in the year 1900. So that remains a huge mystery, and you'll find out where he got that gold, because it is the crown and the royal bloodlines know this information. It's part of the secret society hidden occult knowledge and information. They knew that he had stumbled upon the holy grail of the source and the supply of gold that goes back thousands and thousands and actually hundreds of thousands of years. Around the town of Leidenburg alone, which is about 45-minute drive from where I live, 75,000 gold mines have been discovered. Just one little town. In the 1930s, mysterious tunnels have been reported by gold miners in the northern part of South Africa that weren't supposed to be there. And around between 1971 and 1975, a pre-Inca statue of Viracocha was found in a sinkhole, in a tunnel found in a sinkhole under the town of Carletonville. This is spectacular information, all connected to gold. And sooner or later, you have to deal with the Sumerian text because it still remains the largest collection of written human history. And there you will find story after story about the Anuna gods, or the Anunnaki as they become known, the gods of heaven and earth. And you'll read about Anu and Lil and Enki. You probably know about them already and what they came to earth for. They are among the major activators on this planet, star beings that played a very, very active role. In fact, the more I study the Anunnaki, the more I realize we're not dealing with normal human beings or human-like beings. We're dealing with probably multidimensional beings that have got some very interesting abilities. But somehow they were obsessed with gold, and you know this already. It's not the shiny metal. It was the white powder of gold, the monoatomic form of gold. That's what they were after. And this is why this whole history and the obsession with gold is so mysterious and remains so mysterious, because of this weird deception and what we've done with this mining of the gold, and how it's been lied and how it's been molded into a complete, or distorted into a completely different understanding. The word Abzu comes up, and the place called Abzu has been given many different meanings, but one of them is where the gold came from. Apparently the gold came from the Abzu, and this is one of the translations you'll find. In the Abzu, Enki plans was conceiving where to build his house, where for heroes dwellings to prepare, where the bowels of the earth to enter, to mine the gold. And you'll find some more great translations. In the midst of the Abzu, to a place of pure waters, Enki betook himself. In the land, a place of deepness he determined, for the heroes into the earth's bowels to descend. The earth splitter Enki there established, and I'll show you the earth splitter. There within the earth a gash to make, by way of tunnels earth's innards to reach, the golden veins to uncover. And to do all this, they needed some help, so they did the most obvious thing, and they decided to clone a species. And you'll see the symbol, as you'll recognize, the caduceus, associated with modern medicine. Most people that study at medical school, that work in hospitals, still think that the caduceus logo was designed by an ad agency at some stage. They don't realize it's one of the most mysterious ancient symbols connected to our origin as a species on this planet. And this translation tells it all. Let us create a Lulu, a primitive worker, the hardship work to take over. Let the being, the toil of the Anunnaki carry on his back. And then I'm going to ask you, what kind of stones are the ruins made of? And this becomes very important. They're made of metamorphosized quartzite, this black color, very, very hard. It's known as hornfels, named after a German geologist. The important aspect of this stone is that they ring like bells. They conduct sound beautifully. They ring like bells. And just to show you, these are just some of the very strange shapes of stones that I've been collecting. They clearly don't look like they were normal, and some geologists have told me that you cannot chisel this particular stone because it splinters and breaks and cracks, so they believe that it was molded into this shape. And just to show you how these stones ring like bells, when I realized they ring like bells, everything in my research shifted towards sound as a source and a key component of this. Let me also just show you how some of these other stones ring like bells. This is what I call, and as you can see, we find many of these elongated stones. This one is full of patina. Notice the cone-shaped tool in my hand. It's quite dull, but you can still hear the effect. And this is a beautiful one. This one actually rings at 2 different frequencies. dung, 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 dung. They're quite large. Look at this one. And it looks also like it was inserted into something up to that point. And also, remember, they all ring like bells. This one is no
Notice it's the same note as the previous ones.
All right, and on that note, there we go. That's better. That's what you want. You realize that this thing really rings like a bell and it reverberates for quite a long time.
Same note. It's an E flat, apparently.
And there you go. Demonstration how these...
Okay, you get the message. So what are the stones made of? Most stone on earth is made of one thing, one key important thing, one key component that all our technology is made of. It's all made of silica. Silica is the main component. So suddenly when you start putting this together, you realize, oh my goodness, we're dealing with silicon-based technology. Silica has memory. It conducts light, conducts energy. It stores energy. It stores information. And now that we know that we can store digital data in crystals, some of you may not have heard this yet because that's not good for business. So we're not going to see this on the 8 o'clock news or on main headlines on CNN. Don't let the people know that they can store digital data in crystals. What's important about this is it makes us realize why the ancients did certain things and why they worked with stone. Because stone structures are just giant memory banks. Stone Age, Silicon Valley, all the information that's ever happened around these stone structures is encoded in the silica in the stones. And some 12-year-old kid's going to walk up to Stonehenge, is going to plug in his iPhone and download some seriously interesting stuff. And I just hope he puts that out on YouTube so we can all benefit from it. You know, it's all there. We just don't know how to do it. You know, if you picked up a laptop and you've never seen a computer, how will you know what it does, what the capacity of it is? But if you don't have to extract the silica, basically the technology industry has done the same as the pharmaceutical industry. Pharmaceutical industry looked what the ancients were doing, how they were curing disease with plants and herbs and all that, and they said, oh, this is a clever plan. We'll extract the active ingredient, we'll put it in a bottle so we can sell it to people, and we'll make sure that we make that plant illegal, make sure that people can no longer grow it and use it to heal themselves. And it's the same thing the technology industry has done. They extract the silica, put it into shiny metal boxes because they want to sell the shit to people. That's only about the money. If you don't need to sell anything to people, leave the silica where it is. Leave it in the stone. It's far more efficacious in the stone than when you extract it. And this is when we also realize that these ancient structures are giant machines. They're activated by the light and the sound associated with the light. This is why they're aligned with the movement of the sun. When the sun comes up, it activates the machine to perform a specific function. And when the sun goes down, it stops the activation. So the machine does something else. And at the equinoxes and at the solstices and the equinoxes, the sun activates the machine to do certain things, just like a computer does when you hit enter or any other button. There's an activation that happens with sound and light. A little impulse that happens. That's what this is all about, people. Now that we know this, look at this amazing photograph of some weird stuff coming out of the pyramids, weird energies coming out of the pyramids. The fact that the Stonehenge has got symmetrical patterns clearly tells us that it's activated and it's used, it was done on purpose, not by accident. And I'm just going to go through this. I'm starting to run out of time here. So the quick question is, where's the flagship among all these stone ruins? Adam's Calendar, without a doubt, is the flagship. When I met Baba Credo Mutwa, shortly after I wrote the book Adam's Calendar, and I went and presented the book to him, he started to cry. He told me he was initiated there in 1937 as a young shaman, and that it is known by African knowledge keepers as Inzalo Yelanga, or birthplace of the sun, where humanity was created by the gods. And guess which god it is that created humanity at Inzalo Yelanga? Not just any kind of god. His name, Enki. And suddenly you have a connection between Sumerian texts and ancient African knowledge keeping. That is clearly quite a coincidence, isn't it? This is what Adam's Calendar looks like, badly destroyed. But really, really important that Johann Heine rediscovered it by accident in 2003 and realized it wasn't just an arrangement of stones. The stone on the right, the tree on the right is north, the tree on the left is south, and the north-south line goes right between the two calendar stones. It was originally a circular site. These stones right on the edge of the cliff have fallen over. They're sloping down. They're almost ready to fall down the edge of the cliff, which drops down about 200 meters here, and eventually a kilometer into the Barberton Valley that's filled with at least 15 meters of sea sand sediment. This is a 3D reconstruction of it, where you can see the Horus stone over there on the edge of the cliff, meeting the sunrise, as Horus always does. And who's Horus looking at? 3 stones that mark the rise of Orion over there. And it's just spectacular. You start seeing the similarities between other ancient sites. When we measured the site, we found that it's out of alignment by 3 degrees, 17 minutes, and 42 seconds, counterclockwise. And that's not possible because true north remains true north, no matter where you are in the 26,000-year precessional wobble. So it's got nothing to do with precession of the equinoxes. It's out of sync. True north is out of sync. How is this possible? I don't know. What we do know is that Adam's calendar was built when true north-south is not where it is today. The one person that gives us a hint is Charles Hapgood, says that every few 100,000 years the Earth undergoes a crustal shift or a crustal displacement, and it's possibly something like this that might have happened here. We just don't know when it was built. There are some indicators, but maybe for another time. So what are all these other stone circles for? I think you're a smart bunch of people. You've figured it out already. It's very obvious that they follow cymatic patterns. They look just like cymatic shapes, sand on a metal plate, except imagine the stone boulders being sand grains of sand. And suddenly you realize that these just are cymatic patterns. Every stone circle is a cymatic pattern representing the sound frequency of Mother Earth at that specific point. What does that mean? It means that every stone circle is an energy generating device. It amplifies the sound as it comes out of Mother Earth at that particular point, just like Nikola Tesla was trying to tell us. How do we know this? Because we measured it. We measured incredibly powerful energies coming out of these stone circles. Some of them are in the shapes of magnetrons, generating unimaginable amounts of energy. A magnetron 20 meters in diameter, like the stone circle here, will create more energy than all the power plants on Earth today. Think about this. We don't just have one magnetron-like stone circle. We got thousands of them. Whatever these guys are doing, they were generating unimaginable amounts of energy. And we're looking at a giant energy grid, and guess what? It is still alive. It still gives us free energy every second of every day. We've measured it. We've measured very powerful electromagnetic fields inside them and sound frequencies that boggle the mind, that you shouldn't be measuring in nature. In the gigahertz, we measure the lowest frequency we measured is 14.5 gigahertz coming out of the walls, the stone walls. Nothing outside, just on the inside. We're not supposed to be measuring this in nature. And the electromagnetic waves and the electromagnetic fields inside the stone circles most of the time run horizontally, which prevents satellite connection, which means you lose GPS signal. When you walk in there, you lose GPS, literally as clear as this line here. You step in there, the GPS is gone. That's how defined and powerful the fields are still today. And then when you get to Adam's calendar, it just goes crazy. Very briefly, as you walk, except here there is no wall. There are no stone walls. So we can't even explain how we could theoretically be measuring sound frequencies of beyond 375 gigahertz, people. I don't believe that anywhere in the history of this planet of modern civilization we've measured more than 375 gigahertz of sound. It's just unimaginable. As you walk in there, you cross that imaginary circle, it goes crazy. Nothing out there, and it goes off the charts inside the Adam's calendar circle. When you measure the electromagnetic fields, once again, as you step into the imaginary circle, it's a horizontal effect, horizontal field running there. Electromagnetic activity, it makes you lose GPS, and when you get between the two central calendar stones right there, it changes. And from there, suddenly it's even more powerful, but the electromagnetic field suddenly runs out of the ground into the sky. What do we got ourselves here? We got ourselves one of these. That's what it does. And it's still active because we're measuring these incredibly powerful fields. I don't know of any other site that is as powerful as this. And this is why I say this may be the most important ancient site we have found yet, because of the electronic measurements. And I think it's possibly to beam up the gold. You know, it's just, you know, we can't figure it out, but they may have used it for that. But that's just an interesting theory. And this brings me to the sacred stones. And the sacred stones, which are apparently weights for digging sticks, there are hundreds of thousands of these throughout South Africa, apparently a sparsely populated part of the world, made by Stone Age men in Stone Age times. Really? And that brings me to the Sazer technology, understanding that sound can be turned into a Sazer beam, coherent beam of sound that travels beyond the speed of light and distorts gravity fields around it, with which you can maneuver giant blocks of stone that look like ice cream cones in your hands if you know what you're doing. And that's why I thought for a long time that these sacred stones, these donut-shaped stones, were possibly just frequency converters. Put a frequency in, it converts it and focuses it through the tip, the cone, that then creates the Sazer beam. Like at the tip of this laser, you've got a crystal that creates a coherent light, a beam of light. There you don't need a clear crystal, you just need something that conducts sound. And then I met Daniel Nunes, who told me that his little vortex coils that he makes in New York, when he puts sound into the center, he turns gas into plasma. That's how much energy his little vortex coils create. He turns gas into plasma with his little vortex coils. And suddenly I realized, these things are far more than that. We're dealing with toroid vortex generators, silicon-based toroid vortex generators, just like you've seen the beautiful sketch on the right there in the movie Thrive. That's what we're dealing with. When we put one of these stones in a bucket of water, woke up the next morning and found thousands of tiny little bubbles creating spiral vortices moving around and going into the center of the stone. So clearly the stone is very active. We've started measuring very powerful energy fields around these stones before I started realizing what the hell they were. And then I decided to take one of these stones to Nassim Haramein. This was exactly this time last year. Louise and I got into a plane in Johannesburg because I wanted him to do some experiments with it in his Resonance Project Research Institute. I put the stone in my bag, and we're about to take off for Doha. And in Doha, we lay over for a few hours and get on a plane to Chicago, USA, at which point my bag goes through Homeland Security. And all hell breaks loose. So we're waiting to take off, and the captain says, close the doors and cross-check and blah, 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 and nothing. And suddenly the intercom comes on and says, Louise Clark, please identify yourself. So I look at Louise and I go, what have you done? And she puts her hand up, and the air hostess comes running along and follow me off the plane. So she follows off. I follow her. I'm not letting her get off the plane on her own. And get off the plane onto the tarmac, and there's my bag. They cross-labeled our bags. My bag lying there with 5 guys with guns around my bag. So I go, oh my God, it's the stone in my bag. What am I going to tell them? So as I'm trying to open the bag, so there's a security threat in your bag. So I'm going, oh, God, what am I going to tell them? I can't tell them it's advanced ancient technology. It's not going to go down well. So I think I'm going to tell them it's a stone. That's a curios, African souvenir for my friend in Hawaii. And eventually the stone, after lots of sweating, trying to open this thing, eventually the stone pops out, and the guy, look at it, they're very confused. One African guy among them sees this, and he goes, oh, I've seen that before, and he starts to walk away. That actually diffused the tension, I must tell you. So lots of commotion, put the stone back, up the stairs. When I get up the stairs, I was thinking, the stone works. And when I went and sat down next to Louise, she says, you know what the captain said? By the time the captain came out and stood next to Louise in the doorway looking what's going on, he was saying, if the plane isn't off the ground in the next 5 minutes, in the next 2 minutes, I'm offloading the whole plane. It's like, it was quite a stressful little few minutes there. And then she said, the captain said, whatever is in that bag crashed the TSA security system. So something must have happened when they were scanning my bag. And these frequencies that they scan your bag with, if Daniel Nunes can turn gas into plasma, they must have sent a frequency into the center of that stone, and it just did something and just shut the entire office down. It's like in Ocean's 11. How do they put out the lights in Las Vegas? With an EMP electromagnetic pulse. Something like that must have happened. So we can thank Homeland Security and TSA for proving that these stones are ancient advanced technology. Thank goodness for them and their draconian control. So this brings me, I've really got to speed up here. So the Earth grid is connected, and there's lots of very interesting things. These ancient sites are all built on very specific nodes. Then you find this translation in the Sumerian text, which blew my mind. In distant days, those days after destinies had been decreed, after An and Enlil had set up the regulations for heaven and earth. These are some seriously powerful dudes, right? The regulations for heaven and earth. Enki, the exalted knowing God, by the rules for heaven and earth, the fixed rules, he set up cities. They're suggesting that there's some sort of an energy grid on planet Earth, these nodal points, that is echoed in the sky with some energy grid around the planet, and according to those, they put the cities on the planet, on the surface of the Earth. And that's what we find. These ancient sites are all on these nodal points. And then a few years ago, David Wilcock started sharing that the logos for Space Command and US Air Force refer to these bands around planet Earth as the rules. These wide bands, they don't know where they come from, but they've always been there. Some sort of an energy grid around planet Earth. Now we got the rules referred to by Space Command in modern times and ancient Sumerian tablets as the rules, and the plot thickens. This brings us to ancient sites like in Egypt. This one here, you realize that these big obelisks are just giant antennae. They vibrate and they resonate. How do I know this? Because when I put my ear next to this piece, I realize they ring like bells. It's hollow, man. It rings like a bell, just like the stones that I've showed you in South Africa. And I realize that these are just giant antennae. They are somehow putting something into the sky or downloading something out of the sky. And you realize that these ancient sites have got nothing to do with offering food and praising the gods and kissing butt over there. Otherwise, you get smited, because remember, there's a lot of smiting going on in ancient times. And yet, too many pillars, not enough space, and you go, so what is this all about? And then you see the sort of geometrical shapes over there with no defined doors and entrances, and too many pillars, not enough space. And even this one here, it's like when you look around the Parthenon structure, the famous one, there's the remainder of foundations that are left behind, geometric pattern foundations that are connected to the entrance here with the too many pillars again and not enough space for people to hang around or praise or whatever. And then these ones here again, Parthenon-like structures, and apparently people lived over there and they offered here and then kiss butt over there and then go back to where you live, and it just doesn't make any sense. And then this one just blew my mind. This raised platform with concentric circles in front of it, and then all these bloody pillars, another open Parthenon-like structure there, and you start to realize, hold on, buddy, this has got nothing to do with praising gods and offering food. That these temples are actually templates. Templates for what? Templates for giant circuit boards. And once you see that these are actually giant silicon-based technology, everything changes. And now that I've shown you that the sites in South Africa and Adam's calendar are extremely powerful energy-generating devices, everything changes. We're dealing with silicon-based technology on a gigantic scale that we could not have fathomed until now. And now we start to realize how this energy grid in the sky was kept in place. Giant silicon-based technology, giant circuit boards to generate huge amounts of energy. That's the circuit board, not where people used to live. And when you combine silica with water, boy, do you amplify this. Because now you got the two most abundant elements, both of whom incidentally contain oxygen. But that takes us to a whole other interesting debate, and what happens in our lungs when we breathe the air. As Morpheus said, do you think that is air you're breathing? Think about that. So now we start to get an idea of what how this grid around the planet Earth was kept in place. That these ancient sites were actually generating energy to keep this weird energy grid around planet Earth. The rules, as they refer to. And who kept them in place? We did, human sound. And this is why they got amphitheaters attached to all these places. You put people in there, you either get them very scared or very excited, they make a lot of noise, they're emotionally disturbed, and the energy is channeled into the entrance portal or the the connector of the circuit board, it kickstarts it and creates huge amounts of energy that gets channeled into the sky. There you go again. There's your amphitheater and a beautiful line of resonant pillars that channel the energy into the badly destroyed circuit board here. And there's another one over there on top of the mountain. There's your circuit board badly destroyed, and there's your amphitheater that channeled the energy and kick-started the process too. And you start to realize this is how we've been controlled for thousands of years, and how this energy grid has been kept around the planet. And I've got about 15 minutes left. In these 15 minutes, I need to share the good news with you. This is where it really gets exciting. And this is my favorite part of all this, because I spent a lifetime getting to this point, and the last 10 years putting the philosophy of a whole new society that benefits from this knowledge and information. So clearly, if we can't take this knowledge and information and use it for the benefit of humanity, then it's all a bloody waste of time. Let's all go home, watch Bold and Beautiful, and kick the bucket a few years from now. Just plug back into the matrix. I don't want to do that, and I'm sure you don't want to do that either, because that's not what's going on here. I do believe that the 2012 event was much more than just a cosmic event. The evidence is overwhelming that it was a physical event where that affected each and every one of us beyond our wildest imagination. Why? Because our solar planet, our solar system crossed the galactic plane. What is in the galactic plane? All the condensed frequencies and energies in our galaxies that did what? It activated our DNA. This 98% or whatever it is of our so-called junk DNA, that's where all the good stuff is. All the important stuff that we're not supposed to know about, we're not supposed to connect into, that we're not supposed to use. Well, too late now, because it's being activated. And this is why we got such a rapid rise in consciousness, because our junk DNA is waking up. We're no longer captives to the 2% of the predetermined, pre-coded, slave-coded DNA. That's what's going on, the rapid rise of consciousness. Then, unfortunately, we start waking up and we start realizing some really dark and disturbing things, because we believe that we're all born free on our own planet. But unfortunately, you cannot move around freely. You cannot live where you decide to live, and you need passports and work permits, and you have to follow rules and laws that we didn't agree to. We have to work and earn money to survive. We're the only species on this planet that needs this thing called money. I mean, just think about that, right? And we have to pay taxes to avoid jail time. How is this? This is not freedom. This is not, free will. This is not anything other than slavery. That's exactly what it is. We are born into slavery, people. We're enslaved on our own planet. We live on a prison planet. Look at some of these pictures. We recognize this. This hurts me. When I look at these photographs, I bleed on the inside. I cannot imagine that people could be so deeply disturbed to do this to other human beings. And yet this is what we've been facing for thousands and thousands of years. These are the effects of money and capitalism and the control of a hierarchical system. This is what we face. We've not only become slaves to the entire system, but been enslaving others and believing that this is okay. This is all okay in the name of corporate greed. It is quite spectacular what we've done to each other because of money. It is truly unimaginable. And if you think things have changed, no. We've just exchanged the whips and chains, have been replaced by money. That's all it is. Modern slavery is all about the monetary system enslaving every single one of us, because none are more enslaved than those who believe they are free. So welcome to the club of naysayers, right? It is truly spectacular. Today our enslavement, our brands, corporations, careers, and our governments, unfortunately. Remember, the government is not your friend. How did it get so bad? About 6,000 years ago, when kingdom, or I don't know how many thousands of years ago, let me just not say that, when kingdom was lowered to earth from heaven by the gods, more than 6,000 years ago, and the first priest kings were appointed by the gods. A small group of royal political bloodlines were put in place. These two Sumerian kings lists tell us in great detail when this happened and how it happened, and how the gods appointed the first priest kings and created the royal bloodline on earth. Here we have the physical, written evidence of that critical moment in human history when these royals imposed themselves on everyone in humanity. What did these royal bloodlines do, these first beast kings, when they took control with their fierce weapons and knowledge of sorcery and alchemy or whatever else they were given as knowledge by the gods, because they needed that to subdue the humans, right? They created money. They are the ones that created money. They were the first bankers, and the first banks were the temples in which these priest kings lived. They issued money in the forms of clay tablets like this one. Once again, hidden in plain sight in the British Museum. Millions of people walk past it every day. They got no bloody idea they're looking at the source of modern-day slavery. You're looking at a 4,000-year-old bill of exchange, not written on paper, written in clay that lasts 4,000 years. The paper that our banks use today will not last 4,000 years. We know who runs the world. They're known as the banksters. You know who they are. We know that these families create money out of thin air. If you don't know this yet, you should know this. You know that they control our governments, they control our judiciary. This is why you can never get justice if you go into a court trying to fight the banks. Forget about it. I tried for 4 years. I've given up. Because it's completely pointless. The moment you win against any bank in any court, you set a precedent. What does that mean? It collapses the entire global banking industry. So forget it. If you think you're going to win against the banks in a court of justice, in a corporate structure, not going to happen. They control the education system. If you think that our current education system creates people with life skills, then you clearly need to go and see a shrink. Okay, all it's doing is creating more people with certificates that go out looking for jobs. And what does that do? It just perpetuates the money slavery system. So money controls the wars, you know this. The government and large corporations have stolen the country from its people because all our countries are corporations. And if you don't know this, go and do your research. Here you go, South Africa. On the company search, on the Securities and Exchange Commission, there you go. It's Government of the Republic of South Africa and also Republic of South Africa. They're corporations. There's some more corporations for you to look at, but I'm going to speed through this now because you can do this in your own time. What I need to tell you about is that what do people need? You know what we need. We don't need money because money does nothing. People do everything. We got to start putting people first, not money first. If we start putting people first, we will create abundance beyond our wildest imagination. People create the arts and culture. People are capable of infinite love. Money does not do that. Money destroys love. Money destroys families. Money destroys relationships. Money destroys everything it touches. Our entire lives, our entire system, our entire existence is so infiltrated. Every crack and crevice of our existence has been tainted and infiltrated and influenced by money. It is not easy to reverse the process, people, but we cannot continue this. We have to reverse this process. Otherwise, we'll be stuck here forever. Money is the obstacle to all progress. It's the absolute control tool, and we have to find a new system. The only way to do this is to remove money from the system. There is no other way. Forget it. If you still think that you can find an alternative to money, it's not going to work because we don't need money. We need each other. We need to work together. How do we do this? This is where the philosophy of Ubuntu, ancient African philosophy that's echoed in all ancient cultures, here in Australia as it is in the Americas, as it is throughout Europe, they all have some similar philosophy, which I called contributionism in 2005. The obvious questions, who's going to shovel the crap? You know, I'll just sit on my ass and do nothing. Human nature is to be lazy. You know what? When people say that to me, I get so sad. Because it just shows you how poisoned our minds have become when we think that human nature is to be lazy. No, that's a consequence of capitalism. You're commenting on the consequences of capitalism, not on human nature. And this is the amazing thing. So, a world without money, when you take money out of the system, you bypass the draconian enslavement and you create a world with no crime, with no envy, no gluttony, no greed, no hoarding, no hierarchy, and no hunger, no obstacles of any kind. Everything you've ever tried to do in your life, think about it, is always money gets in the way. Whether it's fixing your car or building an extra bathroom or buying a house or going on holiday, if you don't have the money, you can't do it. Money always gets in the way of progress. And this is the big problem. The 5 points of contributionism is no money, no barter, no trade, no value attached to anything. greater than anything else, because all our contributions should be and are always equally valuable. And a society where everybody contributes their God-given talents or their acquired skills to the greater benefit of all the people in their community. It is really very, very simple. It's so simple that we cannot screw it up. And out of hundreds of thousands of questions over the last decade, I've been doing this since 2010, talking about contributionism. Hundreds of thousands of questions. I've filtered it down to 13 most frequently asked questions. Isn't that spectacular? So what that tells us is that we're all equally poisoned, equally wired, equally tripping ourselves up, and all we have to do is solve 13 problems to live in utopia. Not millions of problems that we have to solve under the current conditions. Remove money, and we got to solve 13 problems, people. I think that's doable. Why is it so simple? Because it follows the natural order of things. It is a self-correcting system. No matter what problem you insert into this moneyless society, it always corrects itself for the best outcome of all the people in the community. Because greed cannot corrupt it. Money cannot corrupt it. No individual can corrupt it with their ulterior motives. It is truly spectacular. There is no other system. Why? Because it's not my system. Because it's the system that follows the laws of nature. And I've just observed it. And being able to follow it for long enough without having to go back to a job that distracted me from my mission. How do we get there? Step by step. Take the first step, take the next step. We got to start working in cooperation and not competition. Competition is the most evil thing that's ever happened to humanity. Competition is not good. Competition destroys people, destroys love, destroys families, destroys everything it touches. Cooperation is what we need to be working with. Cooperation for the greatest benefit of humanity. Transitioning in small towns, using money itself to free ourselves from the money. Because we can't get there in one step. It's going to take several steps to get there. And we're going to have to use money to free ourselves from the money. But by saying that doesn't mean, because there are several steps, means it's going to take a long time. It can happen like this, people. And I can tell you right now, it's happening like that. I believe that transforming small towns, where people can start to agree on things a lot quicker than in large cities, transforming small towns is a key here. Small towns and starting community projects, the way we've started doing community projects in our little town of Watervalboven, South Africa. 3 hours a week is all it's going to take. If you have a little town of 1,000 people and everybody contributes 3 hours a week to one of the community projects, it's 3,000 hours a week. Do you know how much abundance you can create? How many loaves of bread, how many bridges, how many free energy devices, how many cows you can milk, how much you can do with 3,000 hours a week? Abundance beyond our wildest imagination. No municipality can afford that kind of abundance with salaries. It's not going to happen. Community projects is what we need to start. And I believe that energy is the foundation of this. And this is why energy and electricity is probably the most guarded area of our society. Because once we have free energy or an alternative source of electricity, you cannot control people. So, once you have an alternative source of electricity for your community, all you have to do is say, well, for an uncapped amount of electricity, all you have to do is give me 3 hours a week for one of the community projects. What are you going to say? I don't think anyone's going to refuse that. And there you've got your foundation. And this is exactly what we're doing in our little town. I'm going to go beyond this. And what I'm going to ask you is take your kids out of school. If you want to stop avoiding this, take your children out of school while you still can in Australia. If you can still homeschool your kids, start this process now. Because 20 years from now, they're going to see this video. They're going to see you sitting here. They're going to say, my parents knew about this and they kept me in school, the bastards. And you're going to feel guilty about that, right? So master teachers that teach our children skills for life, not regurgitating BS from a textbook that you're looking for a job with. A 16-year-old child in a contributionist community will know how to build a bridge, how to bake a bread, how to milk a cow, how to make cheese, how to grow food, how to create an energy device, how to go to Mars and back in 30 seconds. They'll know everything because by the age of 16, they would have done it hands-on, not sat in a classroom regurgitating BS. So how do you think that a community filled with young children like that is going to be confused about what it should be doing? They'll know exactly by the age of 16 what they're going to be good for, what they want to do with their lives, and the community will already be respecting them and absorbing them for the skills and whatever the contribution is that they're making. It looks like I got about 2 minutes. I'm going to wrap up here. In a world without money, there are no jobs. There are labors of love, what you contribute for your community to create and contribute towards this abundance. And everybody who is a master of their trade becomes a master teacher appointed by that community. What we're doing, we're appointing a council of elders. This is critical. In my book, Ubuntu Contributionism, I have a very clear plan of action. What we're implementing ourselves now, a council of elders of 13 people appointed by the people of the community that are not politicians or bankers or businessmen. Ordinary people that are trusted and honored and respected by the community to speak as one voice for everyone in the community. That is critical. Without a council of elders that speaks for your community, it's going to be a lot more difficult to get this off the ground. So that's what we're doing, and we're creating a whole bunch of community projects. One of the first things we're doing is recycling the rubbish dump so that we can use the money from the recycling to create a community kitchen to feed the homeless, the hungry, the orphans, the young mothers with HIV children that simply cannot afford food. We've got 80% unemployment in our town. Once we feed the people, they will trust you. You'll regain their trust, and they will follow you in whatever direction you want to take them. Feed the people, give them self-confidence back, make sure that they don't go to bed hungry, and they will do what you ask them to do as long as they respect your intentions. The bakery hasn't been operating because there hasn't been electricity. Electricity is too expensive, so we're finding an alternative source of electricity. We're restarting a food growing garden has been completely destroyed. The community center has been completely vandalized. Everything's been ripped out. We finally laid electrical cables back there, put security gates on to secure it so people stop vandalizing it. And I think actually this weekend is the first event there in about 9 years that we've initiated. So that the people use it as a community hall for concerts, music events, open mic, talent shows, literacy training in the mornings, and so forth. Lots more activity there. They're actually busy doing that right now. This is what the health clinic looks like today. We already started cleaning it up and recreating health clinic in there, fixing it up, and all this stuff requires funding, as you can imagine. So far, I've been funding most of it myself out of my own pocket by talking to people like you, but that now has to stop because I can't do that anymore for much longer. Sporting facilities, everything's been broken down. This is what our rugby field and our cricket fields look like today, where 10 years ago they were still beautiful. Completely vandalized, or 15 years ago, completely vandalized by a fascist ANC regime. When it was taken over, it was a perfect 5-star apartheid legacy. Instead of utilizing it for the benefit of the community, they destroyed it. So, fish farm that can breed 1 million fish a month, has been lying vandalized. What I'm going to need to tell you, and then I'm going to finish because I think I'm over time. Only in unity do we thrive. Anything is possible. Remember, only out of unity do you get infinite diversity, just like the cells in your body. They don't fight each other. Liver cells don't attack your brain doesn't attack your heart doesn't compete with your liver. They all work together in harmony for the greatest benefit of your entire body. So start seeing ourselves like that. Start realizing that until we start behaving like that in our communities, we will forever be at odds and be diseased. Only out of unity comes infinite diversity. And this you'll find in the philosophy of Ubuntu and contributionism. We did take this to the elections on the 7th of May, 2014. We went into the elections with 1 million followers. We got 8,234 votes. So you know there was large-scale corruption going on. But you can go online and watch the...
Did you know that the South African Reserve Bank is a private company controlled from Switzerland? And that our banks create money out of thin air? Our government knows this, but they're not telling us. This is Michael Tellinger, founder of the Ubuntu Party. And I'd like to remind you that South Africa belongs to its people. It does not belong to the government or any other private corporation. The government should always be the servant of the people to deliver on the needs of the people and not enslave its people. But they've sold our roads and our minerals to private foreign companies and enslaved us in debt for life. The Ubuntu Party will create a people's bank that creates money for the people, by the people, tax-free and interest-free, to free us from economic slavery, creating huge public works in the process and 100% employment. Let us return the country to its people. Vote Ubuntu Party for a People's Bank. Money for the people, by the people. Vote Ubuntu. So that's the message we sent in the elections in South Africa, but I'm going to finish now and tell you, take this information and share this with everyone. The Ubuntu movement in Australia is already up and running. It's strong. Please join us on the internet. And I do believe that the Ubuntu Party will run for elections in Australia in the next Australian elections. So do with that information what you can. Go out there and share this with everyone, because once they've heard it, they cannot unhear it. Remember, it's all about the sound.